this amazing agreement gave us 3 unpaid days off per year that you've got to plan at least 30 days in advance.
I'm going to get COVID 30 days from now.
Exactly. I'm going to plan for that. Yeah.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
So unions representing more than half of railroad labor have now voted down the agreement that was negotiated between the unions, bargaining committees, and the rail companies with the help, in quotation marks, of the President of the United States and the Secretary of Labor. And let's remember, this is the deal that Biden really tried to sell us on. The media really helped him with that, especially the right-wing media, who said that these railroad workers got the whole store, is what Ben Shapiro said, if you'll remember.
Golly.
And yet, despite Biden trying to convince us and the railroad workers that the deal was good, a majority of them have now voted it down. And so here to answer the question, why, is Paul Lindsey. Paul Lindsey is a locomotive engineer. He serves on the steering committee of the Railroad Workers United. He is a Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen member. That is a Teamsters affiliate. And Ron said he is party to the National Freight Agreement. And so, Paul, appreciate you coming on the show. Does that mean that you're on the negotiating committee for the BLET?
No, that's not what that means. I'm not sure how that verbiage got in there exactly, but I definitely have been working hard to try to get the details of the agreement out to my fellow colleagues and everything. And I take part in what's been going on with the Surface Transportation Board hearings and writing a lot of letters related to the railroad industry about it. But no, I don't work with negotiations.
Gotcha. Okay. I appreciate that, Paul. And I appreciate, and I'll just lay this out for folks. We had Ron scheduled to be on. He is an organizer for the Railroad Workers United, which is an inter-union, cross-craft solidarity caucus of railroad labor. We had him scheduled, but he is not able to attend because he got called into work, right? He had to go get on the trains.
That's correct. He works as an engineer out of Reno. I actually literally just got off work less than an hour ago. I brought a train over all last night. So,
and that's and I think I hope and you'll answer this in more detail as we continue. But I hope that kind of illustrates the not only the hardworkingness of railroad workers, right? Despite lectures from politicians and media folks. To y'all and the broader public saying that you're lazy and you're getting too much money, but also the instability of it. We had he didn't know if he was going to be at work today, and so we booked him, figuring that he was going to be able, and then he just got called into work with less than 24 hours notice, because he just told me like 7 hours ago that he wasn't going to be able to make it, and he's going to have you come instead. And so, that's the kind of stuff that y'all have to put up with all the time, right? I mean, what does the on-call schedule look like for folks like you and Ron?
Well, schedule, that word needs to just be deleted. There is no schedule. But it's 24 hours on call. I've worked the last 7 days in a row. Yeah, you mentioned having 24 hours notice. It's a lot less than that. I mean, we get an hour and a half call time. Basically, our phone rings, and we need to be ready to go to work for a couple days at a time. And it might be 2 o'clock in the morning. It might be 6 a.m. It may be noon. You kind of try to look at where the trains are in the lineup on the website, but you never know exactly what you're getting called for. But
right.
It's part of what we do, and it's what we've always done, and we've never had a retention problem like we do now. This all comes down to the deterioration of the work conditions because of the attendance policies and a lot of the other policies instituted by the rail industry in the last few years.
Well, let's talk some about. Yeah, well, let's talk some about those policies. I want to get to the latest and all of that, but. And we did have Hugh Sawyer on. He's a railroad worker from Georgia about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. and he went over some of this, but I just want to remind folks because this issue gets vanishingly, little coverage, it seems like, for as important as y'all are to the nation's economy. And then when it gets covered, you just really don't hear about the effects of that folks like you have to go through and what you've been putting up with. So talk to us some about why railroad workers are unhappy in the first place. Like, what are those policies over the last, few years, last decade or so, that have really created a problem for employee retention?
So in general, over the last few years especially, we've seen a deterioration of our industry. Now, you look at the railroad, you look at a lot of people that work there, a lot of them are generational, and they have parents, grandparents. They've been in the industry for a long time. And over the last few years especially, though, we've seen this disappearance of this company that we used to, at least, even though we have our disagreements with it, at least admire the industry in the favor of share buybacks and the pursuit of precision scheduled railroading, of lowering the operating ratio, of cutting everything. I mean, whether you're talking the maintenance staff, the maintenance facilities, crews, furloughing crews, even little petty things that sound ridiculous, but like I don't remember when the last time was that we had a summer employee picnic during the summertime. Our company is the largest, oldest employer in Pocatello, and yet we didn't have any representation at either of the two parades this summer. They don't care anymore. They are pursuing the almighty operating ratio, and they are pursuing gains for Wall Street now. They don't run a railroad. They run a corporation. They run a stock symbol that just so happens to run trains. And that fundamentally comes down to what has changed with the industry. And where that has led us to is they have furloughed, several years ago, they furloughed lots and lots of conductors that they hired. And this was before COVID. They're trying to blame COVID for manpower shortages. They furloughed these employees that were loyal, and some had moved there to work. And this happened all around the country. And then when it came time to pull these guys back 2 or 3 years later, none of them wanted to come back, and for good reason. The railroad doesn't want to show any sort of stability. So we had a single-digit retention rate on the employees coming back to work because the railroad showed up what they really think of their employees. And so they just ran us ragged. And around the country, it's still happening all over the place, where these assignments that used to kind of be predictable. So even though you're on call 24/7, if you're on a regular run, you usually kind of have a general idea of, well, I'm going to be off for about a day and a half, and then I'll get called back to work. But when they're out of people, they're calling you to step up, calling you on the phone 7, 8, 9 times a night while you're trying to sleep, to take assignments that aren't yours. And guys have been doing that, especially in some terminals around the railroad, for months and months and months, working every day. And that is where a lot of the just worn out, disgruntled mentality has come from, and that is where the retention among long-term employees, retention rate going down is coming from, because the quality of life has gone away. Another thing is that we are 3 years without a contract. Now they say, oh, well, engineers just ratified. It was only like a 52 to 48% ratification. Definitely not overwhelming. And I don't know anyone personally who voted for that contract for several reasons that I go into. But I got to cover the attendance policy as well. So the railroads over the last few years have imposed these attendance policies, basically implying that really your life belongs to them. You don't own your life. And a lot of us are starting to, especially with 3 years out of contract and watching the railroads embargo our customers and drive freight away and slow our operations down, and essentially in pursuit of more money for Wall Street. In doing this, we just, it's just a cumulative pile that has led to a low retention rate and a disgruntled viewer we don't want to vote for them. didn't want to vote for that contract. And I got.
Well, let's make the sick leave attendance policy explicit if you haven't already, and I missed it. It's how many sick days do y'all get?
We don't get any paid sick days per year. We never have. We get vacation time, which it's not like it's not like European countries where you get vacation automatically. I've worked 17 years to get my 4th week of vacation finally next year. And that's working 12 hours, some days 7 days, or some weeks 7 days in a row.
Right.
Yeah, it's just exhausting. As I said, I've been on a train all night. It can be exhausting. I
mean, just driving, down to Birmingham, like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive is not fun. You feel a little bit wiped after that. I couldn't imagine having to be on a train, this huge machine for 12, 14 hours. It's just ridiculous, unsafe, obviously, and very tiring. And so where we're at now is that unions representing more than half of railroad labor have voted down the tentative agreements that were negotiated with the, quote unquote, help of President Biden and Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh. What was in those agreements that were supposed to, we were told that these were great. These were great, and they're going to really provide for railroad workers. They're going to make the industry better. Biden was really, really trying to sell y'all and sell us on this. How disconnected was what he was saying from reality?
Okay, so going back to, you mentioned that Ben Shapiro quote about our agreement about giving us everything, basically. Mm-hmm. I'll start with mentioning that the percentage, they like to tout the percentage increase that they were giving us, and touting that that's the largest single percentage increase in decades for railroaders. Well, we also are seeing the highest inflation in decades. Right. But that percentage does not include the only portion of our income that is non-taxable. So that is an issue that I've been pushing heavily, is that we lost our ability to itemize our meals a few years ago when those tax cuts came, or tax changes, or whatever you want to call them, during the Trump administration. It wasn't a tax cut for us. We lost $6,000 or $7,000 in yearly deductions.
Wow.
We can't write off our meals when we're away from town 200, 250 days a year.
Wait, hold on. Wait a second, Paul. Wait a second. So you're telling me that the tax cuts for working class Americans that was touted by Donald Trump in 2017 actually raised your taxes?
Yes, transportation workers, it took away a vital deduction that we've always used.
Wow.
We were able to take a standard amount for every day that we were gone and write it off at the end of the year. And that was a huge improvement. We lost that. It's costing us, I estimate, about $6,000 or $7,000 a year, depending on how actively you're working on the road versus in the yard. When we're gone. So we get a non-taxable meal allowance, right? That hasn't gone up, at least in my area. It hasn't gone up since 1993. So I can be gone away from home for 2 days at a time, and I only make $12 on my non-tax. And that did not go up in this contract. So they can tout the highest percentage pay increase in decades, but there are certain portions of our pay that still are untouched, like the only portion that the IRS can't touch, that the state can't touch, that's actually our product of our labor to keep dollar for dollar. So that's an issue that I push heavily on. What was you mentioned about the contract, other provisions in it that we did not like?
Yeah, well, just what were the, because Biden was really touting it, and of course, you mentioned that I mentioned that Ben Shapiro was really going out of his way to make it seem like y'all, quote unquote, got the store, right? But even Biden was going out there and saying that it was this is a great deal, and it's really going to help y'all, and so what were some of the other things that seemed to y'all disconnected from reality that Biden was saying specifically?
So one of the things we were going for was the ability to take time off of work when we're sick, when our family's sick. Just the ability to take time off. That is something that's changed in the last few years, particularly, is the crackdown on attendance, the ability to take time off when you need it. And the attendance policies were preventing people from doing that. So that became a big issue, and the unions were fighting for paid sick time, which it's kind of funny. There's actually an executive order somewhere saying that federal contractors are required to provide paid sick time to their employees.
Right.
And the railroads claim that they're not subject to that, but yet with everything else they claim to be subject to it. So again, the railroads just get away with whatever their interpretation of the law is. We're asking for paid sick days. So this agreement, this record amazing agreement, basically gave us 3 extra paid days, or not unpaid days off per year, not paid.
God.
3 days off per year that you've got to plan at least 30 days off in advance.
30 days in advance. Oh wow, I'm gonna get COVID 30 days from now.
Exactly. I'm gonna plan for that. Yep. And you can only take it on Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday, by the way, too. You can't take it on any sort of weekend or anything. So that is the
hopefully Paul. Now this contract also comes with. I mean, COVID is coming to the table as well and saying that they're not going to get you sick during the days that you can't take off, and they'll give you 30, and that COVID is going to give you 30 days advance notice.
Right? Yeah, the flu is going to.
Yeah,
definitely give you 30 days notice. Yeah. So that is the record amazing great compromise. Was 3 extra days unpaid. And also the railroads promised that they won't discipline us if we're ever in the hospital. You know, how generous of them.
but also unpaid while you're in the hospital, right?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So what we lost was essentially our entire system of scheduling. So while we don't have schedules, we do have a system that makes it to where our runs are somewhat predictable, that we know if you're so you can be on the extra board and work every day and cover all kinds of assignments, different directions. And when you get sick of that, you can go to a regular run, just going a single direction. You kind of have some sort of flexibility in your life. Well, the railroad's been pushing for this idea of self-protecting pools for years, basically making it to where, so if you're on a regular run, and there's 10 trains on the lineup, and you are the 6th one on the lineup, then whenever the 6th train goes out, you're going to be the one on it. You kind of watch where they are location-wise. If, let's say, someone takes a sick day ahead of you, the first and second people take a sick day ahead of you, it doesn't affect you because someone off the extra board covers your spot. So you stay the same relative to them. So if you go to bed at 8 o'clock at night expecting to go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, you shouldn't, in theory, get a surprise call at 11 p.m. right as your eyes are closing that you need to go to work. But the railroads want self-protected pools. They want to cut staff even more and get rid of our extra boards so that the pools cover themselves. So if those 2 guys lay off sick ahead of you, well, I guess you're going to work right as you were going to sleep. So they want that. And they've been wanting it for years. Well, they used this contract as an opportunity to slide that in there.
Wow.
And they basically gave the railroad a blank check that, well, we're going to open the door for self-protecting pools now. And that will significantly reduce any quality of life we have, especially if you're on a longer run like where I'm at. It's going to significantly reduce quality of life. So we got 3 unpaid.
Paul, I hate to cut you off, but I didn't realize this until you just told me, because my impression of the deal was that it was like only marginally better, and that was the issue with it. But you laid out this part of the contract that is actually a step backwards that would allow the rail companies to call you in even more short notice than they do already. And so, there's just all sorts of problems with this contract. This negotiated agreement? Was there anything else that you felt was important to share about the contract, about why your sisters and brothers in the union and in other unions voted it down?
Well, so the 2 provisions on self-protecting pools and automatic markup rules, it laid out basically a foundation allowing for this, but it didn't give us any real details. It says that, we're going to allow for this, and after you sign the contract, well, we'll go ahead and negotiate and bargain about it then. So we still don't actually know what it is. It's just kind of a blank check. And yeah, the railroads have shown many times in the past that you give them an inch, they take a mile. There's not really any integrity in this outfit. So as far as the railroads are trying to play this, like, well, you're going to have a couple of scheduled off days. And even our union is pushing this idea that, we're going to have a couple predictable days off. Well, we already have scheduled days off every year. It's called taking vacation. And the railroads will yank our vacation when they feel like it. We've had in the past where they say I'm going on vacation for a full week and have a plane ticket scheduled for, and a vacation starting at midnight on Friday, right? And then the railroad calls you to work at 23:59 on Thursday night to go to work on a 2-day trip. So I guess you're going to have to lay off sick and take the attendance points if you plan on catching your flight. So they already won't live up to our existing contractual days off. So why are we to think that they're going to live up to a few new promise days? So that's another reason for it. Basically, there's just a general lack of trust in our industry because they don't deserve the trust.
Right.
So then so now that, I think everybody has voted now, a majority, unions representing the majority of labor have voted it down. And the strike dates are all set for December the 9th. So sketch out the possible paths forward for us.
Okay, so with that strike date being there, everyone wants to focus on the strike date, but unfortunately, Congress has made it very clear they're not going to allow employees to take ownership of their lives. They would almost surely force us back to work one way or another. They can force binding arbitration. They could force a contract and just say this is the law. But, one thing I would have, if there's any congressmen that actually listen to your podcast or your show here, they also could offer us a favorable contract if they so chose. But unfortunately, they never doesn't matter which party, no one truly seems to support labor. They can talk about it. They can talk about it at our conventions. But really, when it comes down to it, it really seems like this whole situation was just kick the can down the road until after the election, because now they can force us back to work. Right. And regardless of whose name is on that bill, the election already happened. So there'll be no repercussions for it. So one way or another, they will most likely force us back to work. And everyone knows how devastating a work stoppage could be for the industry. And we've been talking about this for months, especially several months ago when we thought it was actually legitimately going to happen. But what about when the companies themselves instigate the work stoppage? So when the strike was about to happen, when we were just a couple days before it, actually for almost a week leading up to it, the railroads themselves started embargoing customers and shutting intermodal ports and tying down trains early, shutting down the economy to try to twist the government's arm into action. And no one wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to talk about, a labor shortage. Not 1 hour of time has been lost on the account of labor. It has all been at the railroads, that these giant BlackRock-owned corporations that buy back their own shares and take COVID bailouts, they were the ones that stopped your rail shipments for the days leading up to the strike.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing to underline, is that the threat is, the quote unquote threat, is really as much or more, it is all on capital. It's all on these rail companies for one reason or another, because because they have all the power in their hands to end the strike by giving y'all what you're asking for, which is
very reasonable,
right?
Sick leave in the year 2022. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, and so they could just nix the thing in the bud right there. But also, so if they don't do that and y'all strike, it's their fault. And then, obviously, if they do a lockout, it's super their fault. You know?
And that's essentially what they did when they were looking at us striking. But for the several days leading up to it, they were initiating a soft lockout and just saying, well, we're trying to institute a orderly shutdown. But bottom line, these companies are too big to fail. They know that no matter what happens, they can do anything they want. They could run their business right into the ground, and bottom line, Big Daddy government will come in there and bail them out. So that's really what it.
Yeah, well, what are Democrats in the government? What are the conversations? What are the conversations right now? Because you mentioned that that they could, there's seems to me there's more or less three kind of short-term paths. And that's either that there's a strike or a lockout, and that's one option. There's an implemented contract on the company's terms, but you could also just as easily have an implemented contract on the workers' terms, and the government could just impose the workers' terms on the companies. But the conversation around that seems totally limited to to lefty podcasts or radio shows like ours. I don't see any conversation about implementing the workers' terms, or even more than if I was president, right, I would be implementing like triple the workers' terms as punishment for letting the thing go this long, right? I mean that's what you really should be doing, because your requests have always been reasonable. And so what a justice-minded president and government would be saying, look, obstinate companies, we're going to impose not only what the unions are asking for, but we're going to say you have to give them double what they're asking for. But that is not even in the conversation at all. And even just imposing the workers' terms is really, really kind of a fringe part of the conversation. So why is that?
I would say because essentially both parties are owned by the same people in one form or another. There's subtle differences, but we all know that money is really what directs our politics. And the railroads are unchallenged monopolies, just like many companies in the United States. And then you look at the people behind the railroads. You look at the primary shareholders of the big four monopoly railroads. It's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the same people that own basically every other corporation in America, and it's the same money behind it all, and they can buy any politicians they want, and they can direct the agenda. And I think we all know this, and this is in every single industry. This isn't just the railroad. We just happen to be the industry that is receiving the most coverage right now. Mm-hmm. But I believe that our fight here to be able to at least have the right to strike is so important to anyone that believes that they should have the right to unionize, because we are legally allowed to just be forced back to work without question. Congress is just acceptable practice. Well, how in the world can you claim to have a free or democratic country in any way if people don't own their labor?
Right.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.